Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 8, let's have a look. We begin in Braavos, where Lady Crane performs that play again. She's taken Arya's advice and added a bit in her speech about wanting vengeance. She heads backstage, finds a wounded Arya, and takes her home to heal her up, which is a big deal for Arya. You gotta remember that her life these last few years has been one horror after another, losing her family, imprisonment at Harrenhal, roaming the Riverlands, joining a death cult. So this situation of comfort and trust and normalcy is a really special moment, a rare chance to rest and heal, though the books emphasize that Arya may have hurts that will not heal. In the books she says she feels a hole inside her where her heart had been, that the hole will never feel any better. After all that she's been through, Arya is traumatized, deeply damaged, which makes you wonder how her story could possibly end. Like, after all the fighting's done, one way or another, she'll hardly marry some lord and settle down as the noble lady she never wanted to be in the first place, will she? So it's interesting that in this scene she talks about travelling west of Westeros, seeing the edge of the world. Maybe that's how her story could end. Maybe she could say her farewells, get on a boat, and sail west into the sunset, like Frodo in Lord of the Rings, passing on to a place of rest, somewhere between heaven and death. That could be beautiful. That said, the Arya revelations this episode are pretty dumb. It turns out that Arya's stabbing wasn't a trick, wasn't part of a plan, there wasn't a twist. Arya seriously decided to go for a haircut and have a nice afternoon stroll, unarmed, not paying attention when she knew a deadly assassin was hunting her. Has she learned nothing from her training these last seasons? And her stabbing looked like it'd kill her, but all it takes is a band-aid from Crane and she's okay? This makes the stabbing feel like a cheap trick on the audience, a shock to spark the clickbait. Game of Thrones is meant to be a show where if you fuck up, there are lasting consequences, so having Arya get herself stabbed from her own carelessness, then conveniently healed in the next episode, undermines the brutal realism that separates Thrones from other fantasy shows. Every time a character gets stabbed, then comes back the same as they were before, we care less next time a character is stabbed. And that's happened 3 times this season already? So that's lame, but the episode does get better, because this time, Arya has a plan. Somewhere in the Riverlands, a bunch of Brotherhood dudes are talking shit when the Hound comes along and murders them all with an axe to avenge the death of Brother Ray and his community who were slaughtered last episode. But were these guys even guilty? Like, the older two were in the group that threatened Ray's village, so presumably they were involved in the massacre, but the younger guys we've never seen before. They seem to be just a couple of naive young men, so unless the Hound knows something we don't, he just murdered innocent people, didn't he? Are we meant to cheer for this? Maybe this is where the character of the Hound is going. He's becoming more of an anti-hero than a hero, more a Punisher than Superman, someone who's willing to do terrible things in the name of justice. Which could be interesting, but it's striking how opposite this is to what happens to the Hound in the books, where he joins a sort of a monastery to atone for his sins. He begins a life of peace. These chapters in the books are about showing an alternative to violence and conflict, showing that peace can be possible. The representative of this in the show is Brother Ray, but he and his whole community are wiped out in the same episode they're introduced, which sends the opposite message. It suggests that peace and pacifism will just get you killed, that the only way to survive is to perpetuate this endless cycle of violence and vengeance and suffering. If that's the version of Westeros the show wants to show, then so be it, but it does feel wrong to see George Martin's, in many ways, anti-war story turned into a show that sometimes celebrates indiscriminate violence. Varys and Tyrion chat about the status of Meereen, which seems to be improving since Tyrion's peace deal. We see a Red Priestess preaching about Daenerys being the chosen one of the Lord of Light, called Azor Ahai, or the Prince that was promised, which could get awkward when Dany gets to Westeros, cause there, the Red Priest Melisandre thinks Jon Snow is Azor Ahai. You can't have two chosen ones. This could be a problem. Anyway, Varys is going back to Westeros, probably to kill those guys from the end of Book 5, and he and Tyrion say a sad farewell. They seem to have a real friendship here, which is sweet. You can see why they'd feel a connection. They've got a lot in common. They're both very clever, capable dudes who feel outcast from society. Tyrion for being a dwarf, and Varys for being a eunuch. They're fond of each other in the books too, but Book Varys isn't truly Tyrion's friend. In the books, Varys manipulates Tyrion, manipulates everyone. He has this huge, complex conspiracy going on with his fat friend Illyrio, with totally different goals than the Varys of the show. His character is much more extreme and complex, which is cool, but it's also kind of nice to see the show version of Varys being much more able to have actual genuine relationships. It's like a more human version of the spider we know from the books. In King's Landing, the Sparrows led by Lancel try to seize Cersei. It's still crazy to see how different Lancel is from how he started. He used to be this meek, incompetent kid, a fuck buddy for Cersei, and now he's in a religious militia and she's an enemy of the faith. Shit changed. But anyway, Cersei chooses violence. She sends in the Mountain, who goes full Darth Vader on a sparrow. Qyburn looks on like a proud soccer mum, so pleased to see his creation growing strong. Qyburn's another really interesting character. When Cersei first meets him, he's described as looking like some little girl's favourite grandfather, a soft-spoken man with warm brown eyes. He does not look like a monster. We do hear rumours that he does black magic, that he was kicked out of the Citadel for performing experiments on living men, but it's only when Qyburn turns the dying Mountain into the monster he is now through some mysterious process involving screaming and pain and the deaths of innocent women that we realise that this sweet old man is some Yosef Mengele motherfucker. Bad guys don't always look like bad guys in this story. Brienne and Pod arrive at Riverrun. While Brienne chats with Jaime, Bronn chokes Pod for the banter. They chat for a while, and Bronn teaches Pod to fight dirty, which you could totally see coming in handy later on. Maybe Pod could save Brienne by kicking a Bolton in the nuts or something, but meanwhile, Brienne and Jaime talk, and Jaime plays it kinda cold at first, acting dismissive of Brienne, but he does reaffirm his gift of Oathkeeper, that Valyrian steel sword, which is an incredibly valuable gift. Remember, there's just like a dozen of those swords known left in the world, but it's also a very symbolic gift, representing Jaime's faith in and respect for Brienne. That might be at the heart of Jaime and Brienne's relationship, because they both crave respect, but don't get it from the outside world. Brienne is a woman trying to be a knight, Jaime's the Kingslayer, an oathbreaker, so they're both looked down on by everyone. But through their shared suffering, Jaime and Brienne come to see the goodness and the strength and the honour in each other, even if no one else does. And that's why it's so tragic that they're stuck on opposite sides. Jaime serves King Tommen and the Lannisters, while Brienne serves Sansa Stark, who's an enemy of the crown. There is a bit of a star-crossed lovers vibe here, but whether Brienne and Jaime love each other romantically or just as friends might not be the point. They give each other the respect that they both so desperately crave. So Brienne heads into Riverrun and tries to convince the Blackfish to give up the castle and come help Sansa and the Starks take Winterfell, which the book version of Blackfish probably would have done, because the main reason he holds Riverrun is for his loyalty to the Starks, but show Blackfish mostly just wants to defend his family home, so he refuses Brienne and stays inside the castle. In King's Landing, Cersei comes to the Great Hall for an announcement, and she wants to stand by her son Tommen, but she's rejected. By her son, by her uncle Kevin, and by the ladies of court. She feels an outcast right now. Then King Tommen gives his announcement. He says that trials by combat are now banned because they're barbaric and unfair, which is pretty true. It's silly that having a powerful warrior on your side can excuse you for crimes, but the real meat here is that now Cersei can't use the Mountain to win her trial and her innocence. So this looks to be another clever play by the High Sparrow. He's outsmarted Cersei again. But what this also seems to mean is that we won't get Clegane Bowl, the big theoretical fight between Gregor and Sandor that fans have been hyped for years. Which in some ways is unsurprising. The theory always was pretty light on evidence and thematic resonance, but still, why would the show hype this fight if it's not going to happen? Jaime says that is one trial by combat I look forward to watching, so while we might not get Clegane Bowl in the way it was imagined, we might hopefully get something like it. Anyway, so Cersei has her whole plan ruined. She's now all out of options, which means she might be about to do something really drastic, something fiery. Because at the end of the scene, Qyburn tells Cersei he looked into a rumour and found something big, and there are lots of hints at what this might be. Remember the wildfire, the napalmy green stuff that Bran saw buried beneath King's Landing, that King Aerys once used to try to burn down the city? Remember all those times Cersei said she'd burn cities to the ground?
I will burn our house to the ground! I will burn their cities to the ground! I would burn cities to the ground.
Burn cities to ash.
Remember that vision in Season 2 of King's Landing looking like it had been burned? There's lots of evidence in the show and the books that Cersei will try to use wildfire to burn down King's Landing in an act of mad revenge and fury against everyone who wronged her. The only thing left that might stop her from doing all this is her son Tommen, who she still loves above all else, so maybe he'll need to die somehow to spark Cersei's rage and grief. In the books, there is the Valentine prophecy, which suggests to some that Jaime might kill Cersei to save the city a second time, and this shot of a dragon over King's Landing suggests it might be dragonfire that finally sets off the wildfire, so we don't know the details, but one way or another, it looks like the capital will burn. In Meereen, we have a second installment of Tyrion tries to teach Missandei and Grey Worm how to have fun, and it goes a little better than last time did. Tyrion makes a comment about sharing wine with his close friends, which makes you realize Tyrion doesn't really have close friends. He's in a foreign city, far from everyone he knows, his family mostly hates him or was killed by him, and his closest companions back home were people he paid to hang around him, like Bronn and Shae. Tyrion Lannister is really lonely. Their game is interrupted when the slavers roll on in with a big fleet. It looks like Tyrion's peace deal didn't work after all. At Riverrun, Jaime and Edmure have an emotional talk. We get a taste of Edmure's suffering in captivity these last years, and Edmure heavily criticizes Jaime, asking how he lives with himself, giving us an example of how most people look down on Jaime, while Brienne sees the good in him. Jaime responds by ruthlessly threatening Edmure, saying he'll hurl his baby son into Riverrun with a catapult, which seems to confirm Edmure's words that Jaime's an arsehole, but at the same time, it succeeds in convincing Edmure to give up Riverrun peacefully, so Jaime gets to keep his oath to Catelyn not to attack Tullys, which in its own way makes Jaime an honourable man. This shot of Jaime almost represents this duality, with his face half in shadow and half in the light, somewhere between good and evil. This is a picture of Jaime's internal struggle. But yeah, the Lannisters and the Freys take Riverrun. Brienne tries to get the Blackfish to come with her, but the Blackfish chooses to go get himself killed off-screen instead, which is a little lame given that the Blackfish was talked up to be this really amazing dude, and all he ended up doing was standing around and being grumpy, but regardless, Brienne heads off along the river, and Jaime waves her goodbye, until their paths will meet again. In Meereen, a siege begins, with the slavers bombarding the city, the beginning of the so-called Battle of Fire. Just when everything's looking terrible, Daenerys arrives on Dragonback to see what the kids have been up to while she's been gone, and she doesn't look pleased. So presumably, Dany will use her 3 dragons to burn the slavers' fleet, though the other thing to consider is that the Ironborn are still on their way with their fleet. So we've got dragons and harpies and squids all coming together in this huge, crazy battle of fire. Back in the Riverlands, the Hound comes across the leaders of the Brotherhood without banners, Beric Dondarrion and Thoros of Myr, who are about to hang Lem and some other brothers who apparently perpetrated the massacre of Ray's village. The Hound haggles with the Brotherhood over who gets to do the killing and how, which is perverse, and then they sit and have a fireside chat. Beric and Thoros ask the Hound to join them, offering him redemption and a purpose. They talk about winter and the North, and it sounds like they want to go help fight the White Walkers, which is cool. It's not clear how they know about the White Walkers, maybe Thoros saw it in his flames. Thoros, if you remember, is a red priest like Melisandre. He's got a pretty cool backstory himself, check out the Thoros video if you're keen. But yeah, it looks like the Hound is going north with the Brotherhood. Beric and Thoros' flaming swords would certainly be handy against the Whites and Walkers. Maybe they'll also get there in time for the Battle of the Bastards next episode. Maybe Beric will meet Jon. They'd have a lot to talk about seeing as both of them died but were resurrected using the power of the Red God. So lots of interesting stuff to look forward to here. In Braavos, Arya wakes to find the waifs killed Crane, which Arya should have seen coming, right? The waif gives a Bond villain bad guy speech because she's a rubbish assassin, which gives Arya time to run away, leading the waif on a chase across the city. Arya lures the waif to a dark room where she draws needle, turns out the light, and kills the waif using her skills from her time training blind, which is a pretty cool plan. Arya adapted to overcome an enemy stronger than herself. Then Arya takes the waif's face into the House of Black and White and confronts Jaqen H'ghar, who strangely says she is now no one. Which is weird, because being no one is meant to mean giving up your identity and personality, which Arya clearly hasn't done. Maybe Jaqen's just trying to talk his way out of being killed here. He has got a sword to his chest, though even as Arya leaves, he smiles for her. He's clearly fond of her, which is like, fine, power of friendship, yay, but what's the point of being a hardened, fanatical, death-worshipping cultist who gives up their very humanity if you're just gonna be cool with some kid breaking all your rules and killing your favorite student because you're fond of her? The men invested so much training in Arya, and now they're just letting her go? The faceless men of the show simply don't make much sense, which is a real shame. But regardless, we've now finally gotten to the point of the Braavos arc. Arya is now stronger, and she's embracing her identity as Arya Stark of Winterfell. Arya is going home. But what's she gonna do there? Presumably she is after the people on her list, and Walder Frey seems the obvious target. He's been set up as a bad guy this season, and we've seen him celebrating with some Lannisters in the trailers, so maybe Arya will crash the party and kill Walder. We might eventually get to see Arya meeting her family again, seeing Sansa and Jon, and coming back to Winterfell. This is big. Arya Stark is finally coming home. So that was a mixed episode. The Arya stuff was bad in parts, but there is cool stuff happening in Meereen and King's Landing and the Riverlands, and next episode is the Battle of the Bastards, and after that the season finale. Just 2 episodes are left, and they both promise to be huge. So thank you for watching, and thank you to all patrons supporting this channel on Patreon, including Eric Lewis Dreyfus, Todd Marcus, Chris Cole, Eric Casqueda, Sean Cathcart, Sam Schleifer, Rajiv Kothari, Caitlin McKinney, Javi Ortiz, VC Gillyhoon, John, Nick, and Bull. Cheers.